Welcome back to the Jude 23 Community Podcast. Today we have a very special guest. This is Pastor Mark Hatcher. Mark has been a pastor for more than 20 years and has spearheaded multiple church plant and church revitalization efforts. And today he is here to talk to us about how to recover from church scandal. So if you would, join me in welcoming Pastor Mark Hatcher. Mark, how are you today?
Hey, Jeremiah. Good. Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's cool.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to have you. You are a wealth of knowledge and just full of grace and truth, and we're ready to hear every little bit that you have to offer. Let's go ahead and start out just with the question. I'd just like to open it up with complete vulnerability, and I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your love for Jesus.
Oh, man. Well, I'm thankful that it's deepening. You know, it seems to be the longer I live, the more I pastor and serve in this capacity. My love and dependence on him grows deeper. I'm thankful for that. I don't say that to boast. I just think it's cool how that's, you know, like Paul. I love Paul's words. He says, I want to know Christ. I want to know him. You know, it's like after he experienced a lot of stuff, and I just want that desire to burn in me as well. And so, man, I love Jesus. I need him more and more every day. I just want to become more like him. You know, I really do. I mean, I want to authentically be Christ-like in everything I do and say. And so that's the daily moment by moment, effort, I guess, and just yielding yourself entirely to the Lord. But I love him with all my heart, and so thankful. It's a privilege, even after all these years, to serve him in the painful moments and the good moments. It's a joy. I mean, I'm not worthy at all. I don't say that to, not humble brag. It's just true, man.
Right.
I serve. I'm like, and I don't deserve this, but so amazed that he could, would invite me to partner with him. So
yeah, that's so good. And I've been a pastor for a number of years, and you've been a pastor for a number of years. But even just being a Christian can sometimes be tough, even in the world we live in, and trying to figure things out as society and culture kind of goes through its multiple changes year after year. What has kept you in the love of God, and what has kept you from kind of walking away when things got tough?
Mm-hmm. I guess just, first of all, I mean, the most basic thing is just think of all that Christ did for us. Think what he gave, think what he sacrificed, the cost he paid for us. I mean, how could you walk away from that? It's kind of like Peter, right? When Peter said, where are we going to, he said, do you want to leave too? Jesus said, and Peter said, where are we going to go? I mean, you alone have the words of life, the words that lead to eternal life. And I don't know, just his love for me, I guess, is the most compelling thing. But then, his calling, the calling has kept me anchored, and it's nothing that man produced. It's nothing that I dreamed up. It wasn't some personal ambition for me to serve in this way. This wasn't even a thought in my mind to be a pastor or to serve in this capacity. So just his calling, to keep returning to that has kept me from, walking away. And of course, those personal, just the simple things, right? It's nothing really grandiose, just that simple disciplines of getting up when you don't feel like it, when you'd rather just curl up and lay in bed, get up, get your face in the word, get on your knees in prayer and cry out to God and just be honest and authentic before him. I mean, those are the things that keep you anchored and keep you on that firm foundation, right? I'd say also, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't say my wife as well. Just been a rock, God has never let us get down at the same time. There's been times she's been down and I've helped her up, and I've been way down, and she has said, you're not quitting, you're called to this. You can't, I want to go flip hamburgers at Wendy's, but she's like, no, you're called to be a pastor. So anyway,
that's so good.
Multiple factors,
Just FYI, my wife has told me multiple times that your wife is one of her favorite people.
Wow, yeah.
Yep, she is. Your wife is really special. Give us a little bit of background on yourself. Tell us about your wife. Tell us about your family.
Sure. Man, been married almost 25 years. It'll be 25 years this year. We have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. Time is moving fast, so fast. I mean, we're on that. I feel like, those early years of parenting and you're just click like a roller coaster. And then now we're over the hump and we're zooming down. And, it's just,
you married somebody off recently, right?
I got married here about 6 or 8 months ago, back in November. Our second daughter, we just graduated her. We're moving a daughter, our third daughter, youngest daughter, into high school. She's a freshman this year. And we still got our son. He's the youngest. He's in 3rd grade. So it seems like we got a long time with him, but now
with your son, you guys, and this is really special to my heart because we went through a lot of the same processes. But your son's adopted, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about that process. How'd that go? How were you led to that, and how did it all fall into place?
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother podcast. But my goodness, very, very long story short, we just felt called to make a difference. Like we're seeing all this crisis in the foster care system and lack of homes, and that's everywhere. That's in every state, every community. And we just like, man, we got to do something. And so we really felt that we wanted a boy. And we had 11 or 12 children in our home over a period of years when we lived in Missouri, and girls and boys. So, but we just felt like God wanted to direct us to a son. And the reason for that, not just because we didn't have a boy or couldn't have a boy, it's just that we just felt like, man, if we could invest in a young man's life, I mean, any child's valuable. We could invest in a young man's life. That man could take the lead, change his family, change those generational cycles, and so that was kind of our vision, and we didn't know how that was going to play out. But long story short, our first placement was our now son, and he was very, very sick. He had extensive brain injuries. There was a big long name to it medically, but basically lack of oxygen. He about died. His birth mom about died. They were transported to Children's Hospital in Little Rock. He was there for 3 weeks before we went and met him for the first time, and then took him home a couple days later. They really initially placed him with us because my wife's an RN, and so they thought that'll be a good match. But it was doom and gloom on the human, from the human aspect. They said he'll never recover. It's as good as he's going to get. All these seizures, lack of oxygen, just done irreparable damage. And so we just didn't receive that, and we just had faith that didn't even seem to come from us. It just came from the Lord Himself. And anyway, just over the year, he's almost 9 now, and he just he's playing baseball and everything under the sun he does, and everything he does. They said he would never do. They said he'd be in a wheelchair, feeding tubes. He was so stiff as a baby from lack of oxygen. I remember our girls, they'd work with his arms and legs and work with him, and they said that would never get better, as good as it's going to get. And anyway, just God did a miracle. I remember the church praying over him and anointing him with oil, and just feeling something happen, just like man, something in that moment happened. I'm telling you. Anyway, very cool story. And there's so many miracles, not just his physical healing, but the miracle of us adopting him. That shit, we didn't have a chance in the world. Honestly, we're so far removed from having an opportunity, and then God just did miracle after miracle in the legal system and with our special counsel and resources He brought to us. It's unforgettable season of our lives. So many faith lessons. But it was fire too. It was trial by fire too. It shaped us.
You're right, because that sounds so similar to our experience. It took 3.5 years to get through the process for each kid we adopted, and it was a wrestling match from beginning to end, and not just like you said, legally and with all the hoops to jump through with the different state requirements and whatnot, but spiritually it was a battle. Like it felt like warfare over and over again. I remember at night laying in, putting my daughter to bed and just laying on the floor with my hand up on top of her and just praying over her and just asking God to do something, and that prayer of just surrendering, like that feeling that I can't change this, I'm helpless in this situation, and nothing else is going to change this unless the Lord intervenes, and just praying those prayers over and over and over again. So I think you're right. I think that'll be a whole nother podcast that we could sit there and talk through. But I want to kind of get to start getting to the meat of the issue today. You've been a pastor for a little over 20 years. Tell me about that. What brought you, first of all, how did you come to know the Lord? How did you start following Jesus? And when did you get called into the pastorate?
Oh, wow. So I was in high school, born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, and went to Hayesville schools. And we grew up in a good home, good moral home. Parents supported me. My parents were divorced when I was 2. My dad remarried when I was 5. So I had a good, stable home in as much as possible, right, in the split family. My stepmom, she stepped up, and they took care of us. They went to all of our events, and we went on family vacation. We're a good family. We had Bibles in the home. We said mealtime prayers on occasion, but it was pretty, I don't know, it was just religious. There wasn't any heart to it, and I'm not blaming my parents for that. I didn't know, I guess this is the best way to say it. I didn't know that you could have a personal relationship with the God of the universe. I didn't know that. I didn't know I needed that. I didn't know I needed forgiveness for my sins. That was never really talked about. We did go to church, but always found a reason to not like that church. My parents did, and we'd move on to another one. And then, months and months at a time, we wouldn't go. Anyway, so I know there's so many moments I'm sure that God used to bring me to Him, but I'll never forget. I was over at a friend's house, and he invited me over after church. He invited me to church a lot because often I wanted to live a dual life, right? I want to go party with the crowd, the popular kids on the weekends, but I was drawn to this. I was drawn to something in them that I was seeing. And I was over at his house and getting ready to have the meal, and his dad, Howard Mark is his name. He just began to pray for the meal, and I was talking, and so I didn't realize they were praying because we didn't do that much at our house, and so I stopped, like, oh, kind of embarrassed. And anyway, long story short, it was like he was talking to somebody he really knew, man. Like, he really knew it. It wasn't some, thank you for this meal kind of artificial prayer. It was real prayer, and I was so stunned by that. I was like, man, I was so captivated. I thought about it for days and days after that, just like, wow, what is this? And I think that's really what started really drawing me in. I don't have an actual date that I said the prayer, went to the altar. It wasn't some big emotional experience. But, looking back, there was two defining things, two things that changed instantly. Number one, I couldn't wait to get to church. I couldn't wait to be in the house of the Lord with the people of God. And that was not the case. I've made every excuse possible to not go to church when I was a teenager, especially. And then number two, my love for God's word just erupted, man. I didn't understand God's word. I didn't know how to find any books in the Bible, but I just couldn't get enough. Just insatiable hunger. Those two things for sure. And no pastors in my family, no basis for this at all, no modeling really. But I just felt that it's like God wanted me to do more. And so I went and talked to my youth pastor at the time. I said, man, I changed my major like 5 times. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with this communications major. That's where I ended up, communications, right? That's what you do when you don't know what to do. and my youth pastor at the time he just said, I just laughed inside because I knew God called you to be a pastor at that moment. But he said, the Lord instantly said, but you can't tell him. And his name was Rolf Kleinfeld. And I know maybe some of your listeners know him or you know him, but Rolf Kleinfeld and Debbie are still great friends, and they're pastoring now. But he said I just respect him for that. He didn't say a word to me about that. He just listened. He prayed for me, and then he let God call me. And then when God called me, I don't, again, not a lightning strike or anything like that. It just made sense. Like, and I was so, probably it was good. I was so naive, because I didn't know. I should have been scared to death, but I wasn't. I was like, okay, cool. Following God and giving my life to him, and I'll do whatever he wants me to do, kind of thing. And I remember talking to my pastor at the time, and he said, well, Mark, he said, he was so supportive. He said, a call to preach is a call to prepare. I didn't know what that meant, but he went on to explain that you need to get into a Christian university, and I recommend Mid-America. And so I transferred as a junior into Mid-America. Funny little part of that, I didn't know how my parents would take it. I didn't think they would be opposing, but I didn't know. Had a little fear. So I went ahead and paid everything I could pay, every fee I could possibly pay to my meager resources to lock myself in, so to speak, before I told my parents. And then I told them, and they were a little shocked, but they definitely got on board. They supported me, and they helped me financially. And so that was great. So I started, from 1995 to 97. I graduated at Mid-America, and then I went on to seminary, graduated there in 2001. Took our first church, and I don't know if you want me to go through all that, but pastored in Smith Center, Kansas for 5 years, then in Ava, Missouri for 11, and then we've been here almost 6 years now. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess I didn't know that you were up in Smith Center at all.
Yeah, that was our very first church. Dr. Ed Nash was our DS then. He placed us there, and it's good. Yeah,
that's awesome. Let me dive in just a little deeper with that too. In becoming a pastor, you've done church plants, you've helped revitalize other churches, you've mentored other pastors and leaders, and I mean, you've just kind of done it all over the last 20 years or so, it seems like. What do you feel have been like what's the motivation? Like what's your ultimate hope that you hope to accomplish or gain? Because it's obviously not going to be money and it's not going to be any kind of fame or sense of success. So what are you hoping to accomplish by continuing to just dive into being a pastor?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess let me back up and just say all those experiences, like it doesn't even seem real at times. Like I don't say it's anything great. I'm not a pastor who I wish I was. I wish I had a pastor. I had this, this big, clear vision 5 years down the road and just working strategically. I don't feel like I've ever been that in my ministry. I've tried to be purposeful and most of all obedient. But many of those experiences, God just led me to, and sometimes with me kind of resisted. Church planting is a great example. The first church planting conference I ever went to down in Marshall, Texas, went with our DS at the time, who's now in heaven, Dr. Jim Dillow. And I didn't want to go. I'm like, man, I don't like being away from my wife and family at all. And I just like, why on earth do I want to go to a church planting conference? I already have a church to pastor. I definitely don't need another one. I can't handle this one. And, on certain days. And that was my attitude. It was so terrible. It was so unbiblical. And I just didn't have a frame of reference for church planting at all. And I was very narrow-minded in what a church looked like. I didn't think, and anyway, but God used that. I went, I thought, well, if nothing else, it's an opportunity for me to go hang out with some pastors and some friends and maybe play a little golf, on the off day. And anyway, I went down there and was kind of like, whatever. But man, God that was a lightning strike moment there. That was like, bam. It was like, and I got this vision for a church, and it was our first church plant. And it's just great. We had the opportunity here a few months ago to go back and preach at the 10-year anniversary of that church, and they're doing phenomenal, and not because of us, obviously, but just great leadership over those 10 years. But, just really awesome to look back and see that God used your faith and used your obedience, and it was a total step of faith every step of the way. We didn't have anything. Anyway, that's a whole nother story, obviously, too, but I don't know what your question was. What I hope to gain. I don't know. I guess if I'm being just really blunt, you care? It's okay to do that.
Yeah,
really blunt on
please.
the podcast. If I was a younger pastor, I probably wanted those awards. Right? I wanted those awards.
Right.
I wanted recognition. I kind of wanted to be known on the district or whatever in the Nazarene circles. And man, I love the Nazarene family, but I just literally care less than nothing about that now. I mean, just like that's not even not even a desire. I don't care if I ever get a superintendent's growth award or whatever they call it. I just want to find out where God's working, and I want to join him, and I want to see people go from bondage to freedom and heading for destruction to eternal life, and just see that transformation. I just want to see that over and over, and then teach them to do the same for others. Right.
Yeah.
It's a vision you can give your life for. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot more I could say about that, but I don't know. I guess it's just, that's part of the process, right? As God matures you and shapes you, and as you get humbled a lot in ministry, a lot of that falls away. That stuff falls away. And you and I.
Well, and that's a good point, because talking about being humbled, because it's all lights and glitter. It's not cookies and rainbows. There's a lot of struggle and there's a lot of heartache along the way. And so, what do you feel like your greatest struggle was so far as a pastor?
Oh man. So inwardly, I'd say probably two ways I could think about that or respond to that. Inwardly, just this feeling of inadequacy, man. I've battled that just throughout my ministry, just feeling so inadequate. And you try not to let that paralyze you or shape you, and alter your path or your obedience. But man, really, if I'm being honest, I just don't, you just feel like, man, I don't think I can preach another good message, or that was a terrible message, or I don't know, man, I got all these people following me, and I don't even know where I'm going half the time. It feels like that, right? God's
right.
faithful. He's out there in front. So that probably is an inward battle. I'd say at times just spiritual warfare is huge too, right? I mean, it used to be like, I used to be like almost, and I don't know, I don't think it's depression. I don't feel like I ever get depressed too much. There's situational depression I've dealt with over the years, but I'm pretty up, and I can stay pretty optimistic and joyful. But there was a time in my ministry where after I preached, I was so down. I just I want to sleep. And I knew that about myself. So I had to stay busy on Sunday afternoons because they would hit with a fury. It's like all these thoughts. So there's some of that spiritual warfare. I'd say outwardly, just inward focused consumer Christians who just like, it's all about me and the church is here for me. That's a huge drain. That's a huge battle. Like, man, you're missing the best part of what it means to be a follower of Christ.
Right.
Do his will. You're just missing out on the joy that and for whatever reasons, how they were raised or what messages they heard growing, I don't know what the reasons for, but just turned inward. Right. And so some battles like that, but those have been some of the greatest struggles. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about what you were saying was that a lot of people, especially once success starts happening, like they start to struggle with this idea of imposter syndrome, right? And this has been true even from the beginning. We read about this in Scripture where Jesus picks a bunch of ragtag people to go and to continue his mission. And man, I felt like that was one and the same for myself. And like you said, I feel like you probably felt that too. Like, God, why are you calling me to come and do this? Because there's so many more qualified and better people to make this happen. And man, but he does. He calls us, and he equips us, and he sends us out, and we're there. I just did a video a while back on unity, identity, and purpose. And when those three things fall into place, man, it feels like the Lord's presence is just there.
Yeah. It's good.
It is good. Well, let's dive.
I just add, I think the Lord has probably shielded me from, at times, he lets me get glimpses of maybe ways that he's worked through me or used me. And sometimes people will come and offer that. They'll say that happened. But I think, in many ways, I think the Lord shields me from that. And it's probably a pride issue, just like, hey, stay humble, stay focused, and it's not you. And that's probably good, but yeah, sometimes it's good to, and he knows that. The Lord knows you need a glimpse every once in a while. Like, hey, don't get discouraged. What you're sowing is bearing fruit. So yeah.
Yep. That's good. I want to dive into specifically the topic today, and looking over across. Let's just keep it in North America right now, but it's probably worldwide. There seems to be no shortage of scandal happening within the church, right? And it doesn't matter if it's a Protestant church, if it's a Catholic church, a Lutheran church, a home church, anywhere where it seems like God's people are meeting together, that scandal is, I don't know, it's something that people are susceptible to, and scandal can be a broad stroke, right? Like, it could be a money scandal, it could be a spiritual abuse scandal, it could be a sexual scandal. All these different types of scandals happen in the church from time to time. I'm not going to say that it's regular or that it's common, because I don't think it is. I think when you take all the churches that you see, specifically here in North America, and the idea of scandal is not as common as what people make it out to be, and at the same time, people still experience scandal in a lot of different ways in churches that they're a part of. So I guess my first question to you would be, like, why does scandal happen? What makes a church susceptible to this, and how do people fall into it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was just thinking too, as you were saying, it seems to be more prevalent today. That's probably because of social media, right? It's probably just quick access to phones and social media, the ability to disseminate that. And then, of course, our enemy loves to highlight that, right? To make that seem like it's everywhere, and that's a spiritual attack against the body of Christ as well, and against Jesus. And those thoughts come to mind. What makes a church susceptible? What makes a person, a pastor, I guess, susceptible? I don't think it just happens overnight, right? I think you'd agree. It's like boom, like everything's fine, and then boom. I think there's this. If you could dissect it, if you could do an autopsy, which we can't, we don't have that privilege or that insight, but you'd see choices upon choices, and letting the guard down, and slow fade. Is a term you might use. I think that's definitely part of it. I think of David when he was walking around the rooftop on his palace, and he saw Bathsheba, and there began that great fall and great sin, and the cover up that ensued. I guess it's just, maybe it's just feeling like this self-sufficiency. Like, I've been doing this long enough. I'm talking about pastors now. This could be true for anybody, but hey, I've been doing this long enough now. I'm in a rhythm. I know, and I don't have to be as diligent, right? Of guarding my own heart and abiding. I mean, maybe we just stop abiding, and then we start drifting. Yeah. That drift starts. So that's a broad answer, but I think that's all very relevant to this. Just, and again, I don't even think the people who have experienced scandal personally, been a part of it, they even know how it happened, honestly. Yeah. Hopefully, that could be, I think it's vital that some of that gets figured out, right, so it doesn't get repeated. But
so speaking specifically on pastors, yeah. I think there are some cultural, let's just say, red flags that kind of sets the stage for different things to be able to happen. And I'm not even saying it sets the stage for anything specific, but it just kind of opens the door for things to come in. But you have some churches that are kind of leader-centric, like everything rises and falls on this one guy. You have some churches where there's just high levels of entitlement within the church, like the leaders are entitled to certain things, or there are some churches that men are entitled to certain things, and this kind of like culture of entitlement that says, because I'm entitled to this, I can do no wrong. And I think that also there's cultures that don't allow for any kind of accountability or feedback to their leaders. And so as things begin to become more and more familiar, there's an old saying that familiarity breeds contempt, right? And this idea of contempt is that I'm above the rule, I'm above the law, and I'm above any kind of accountability. And when people start to have contempt in their situations, it creates a environment for crash and burn.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think part of it too is just those lack of personal moral boundaries, and not just personal for you, but you're sharing them too. That something, again, God led me to. I'd like to say, oh, I was just so wise that I thought of these, but it came out of necessity. I was pastoring about 6 or 7 years into, probably about 7 years into my ministry at the church in Missouri, and in the community at another church, not ours, but another church, there was a church scandal between the youth pastor's wife and the lead pastor. It was awful, And man, it just rocked our little community. And I'll never forget sitting in a leadership team meeting, a board meeting, that really soon after it happened, and everybody was kind of shell shocked, because it was like, whoa, I can't believe this happened, and that got me on a journey of saying, okay, man. And I felt like everybody, they didn't say it, but it was almost like, okay, what about you? What about you, buddy? How are you going to protect? And so that led me to putting in some really clear moral boundaries. I mean, some of them, I would say this is the word of God. And then other things, I think God just spoke to me and said, you need to have these. And I wouldn't prescribe those for you or anybody else necessarily. I think they're wise, but I share those with my wife, my daughters. My daughters could, if they were here, they could quote them to you. They could tell you what my moral boundaries, I talk about them a lot. I've said it from the pulpit. Look, if you see me getting outside these boundaries, you come tell me. So I think putting yourself out there like that, welcoming that kind of accountability and a watchful care of people that love you. But yeah, and just, I've never, again, not that I'm anything great, but I've never compromised on those boundaries since that moment.
Yeah.
When I put them in place, I think that's the key. I don't move them for anything. And at times you feel strong enough to do it, right? There's that
Right.
sense of like, oh, I got this, I've never, for instance, I never stay overnight in a hotel by myself, ever. So there's conferences that I've missed. If Amy can't go, if a friend can't go, if I can't stay at someone's house, I won't do it. And I don't give rides to females. I don't give outside my immediate family. I don't have lunch even during the daytime with. There's a list of boundaries that I have, and that is crucial. And I think if any time we say, oh, this one time will be okay, I think that can start that eroding, that can lead to a fall, later on.
So when scandals do end up happening, regardless of what the topic is, when scandals happen, why do you think a lot of churches in the past and even in the present tend to sweep it under the rug or try to deal with it internally rather than, especially when it ends up being something that's illegal, where the law has been broken and things have to be done? Why are churches tempted to more so sweep things under the rug rather than deal with it head on?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll give an answer, the best answer I can give. I'll make a statement first. Categorically, that is the absolute worst thing you can do. I mean, hands down. You invited me on because of our experience with this and how we handled it. You'll get to that, I know. But that is the worst thing. We didn't do that, and I'll wait till you elaborate on that. But yeah, the worst thing you can do. I think it's just embarrassment, right? Just flat out embarrassment. We're embarrassed by this, man. How could this happen? And then just relying on our own understanding, right? Proverbs 3, don't rely on your own understanding. Right. Don't lean on your own. They can say, hey, we can manage this. We'll handle this. Thinking somehow, reasoning it's going to be worse if we just come out with it, and trying to, especially today, churches since COVID, man, a lot of churches have never recovered numerically, and they're trying to hold on to everybody still. And so when a scandal comes, you think, oh my goodness, we're going to lose more people, more givers, more volunteers. Probably all that fear enters in, right? Mm-hmm. But it's the worst thing. That's the death nail. If you want to blow your church up from a crisis, do that, and that'll be the end of it. I don't think you'll ever recover if you do that. So yeah.
Right. Have you talked to unchurched people, people that aren't in the faith, people that have maybe even never been to church before? And have you ever heard their opinions or their perceptions of the church, especially when scandal ends up happening?
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I wish I could say probably I'd been more intentional and having more in-depth, personal conversations built on real solid relationships. I'm trying to think of anybody I know personally that fits that category. I've had that conversation, but in passing, sure.
Yeah.
And on the surface level, you hear, and the sad thing is, right, that people are like, that's how they think all churches are. Like you alluded to earlier,
Yeah.
like this is, and you just want to say to those people, man, it's not how, and it's sad. It is, because it puts all of us, I don't think it matters where the scandal happens, at whatever type of scandal is, wherever, big mega church in California or in the Midwest or wherever, it paints all of us. It puts all of us under a microscope of suspicion, right?
Yeah.
And that's so, and you can't talk your way out of that. You can't prove to someone with your words. But yeah, it's sad. The perception of the church is just, it's increasingly tainted, and then people withdraw from the church and withdraw from the Lord. I think as results as well.
Well, and I seem to think that there's probably a level of disappointment, because even if a person doesn't go to church, or they're not a believer or following Jesus at the time, they still have this expectation that churches are and supposed to be above reproach. And so whenever that fails to happen, there's a very, even for somebody that's not connected with the church, there's a sense of disappointment. And to watch something fail like that morally, that is supposed to be the moral light of a community, and to see that light either get blown out or to get dimmed and darkened a little bit, it's got to lead to a lot of disappointment.
Yeah. Think about what we claim. I mean, just as Christians in general, we claim that the Spirit of the living God lives in us, and He's made us new creations, and the old is gone, the new is gone. We claim that, if we don't say it like that, that's what, and then to prove that, disprove that by our actions, or show that to be false. That's very disillusioning, I'm sure, to our world. Even for people, like I said, who don't have any faith or don't have claim any connection to a church, they're like, wait a minute, that doesn't connect. So yeah, it's very disheartening.
Yeah, there seems to be a real phenomenon right now too, in the last several years, that whenever a scandal takes place in the church, there's a lot of people online specifically, they're like scandal hunters, right? And so they're looking for areas where the church is failing, and then they highlight it and they emphasize it and they magnify it. And then online, it gets this great big stir of people who are so angry at this scandal, and let's just point all our anger at them. And it results into, ultimately, I think, a lot of the leaders being canceled. There's not a lot of grace involved to it, and maybe there are some circumstances where leaders do need to be just, like this was a grave offense, and it's time for you to step down. But in a lot of areas, like you see very little grace, very little room for people wanting to see leaders restored and brought back. What do you think is kind of feeding this phenomenon?
Yeah, part of it, maybe they, like you said, they just kind of rejoice in the falling, like, oh man, yeah. And then maybe they use it as a smokescreen, perhaps, in their own lives. Like, this is a smokescreen. Like, oh, good, that just validates my choice of not being connected to the Lord and to His body, and being a part of that. So some of that's probably true as well. I think if you have a relationship with someone like that, I think you could probably press them a little bit and say, where's this coming from? But I think, I'll argue the other side too. We are called to a higher standard. I mean, as pastors, especially, I mean, the Bible's so clear, right? I mean, James 3:1, not many of you should not desire to become teachers, right? You should more strictly. I mean, Titus chapter, 3, right? Or Titus chapter 1, I guess it is. It talks about being blameless, self-controlled, holy, just self-discipline and self-control. So there is that, and like we keep watch over people's souls, and that's serious stuff. So yeah, there is this there. That's not to be ignored or rationalized. But at the same time, the grace of God is available to anybody, and there's nobody that's fallen so far. If they'll truly repent and turn around and seek the Lord with all our heart, there's nothing that God cannot forgive. And I don't believe with time's a key component in this, that they cannot be restored even to ministry again. Maybe not at that same location, probably not wise where it happened, but in time, be used of God again. I'll elaborate more on that if you remind me when we get to specifically how we responded to this, because we made a statement that I think was very well. Let me just say, because it's relevant here. We made a statement when we read a letter, and I'll elaborate on that. But it was like, they've been disqualified from pastoral ministry, okay, because of their choices, because of their actions on our couple staff members. But I made it clear they have not disqualified themselves in any way from the love and the grace and the forgiveness of our God. And so made that statement. We wanted people to, that theological foundation, and they're not just out there. God has not left them in a band. He loves them as much as ever. And so I think that was helpful to our folks to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And that does bring us into kind of the center of this topic. Is there at the church you're pastoring at there in Kansas, you had not to get into too many details because we don't want to dive in and kind of break down the offense, but you had a couple staff members that really fell into some egregious moral failure, and that rocks a church. That rocks a church through and through. So I guess my first question is this: like, who was most affected by this event when this happened?
Yeah, literally everyone. I mean, everyone. I mean, even our first time guests, because you had that going on that Sunday. We came out with the news and shared that with our church and began that healing process with our church, entire church. First time guest. I mean, obviously, but probably children and youth probably were hit the hardest. There was different levels of response, and as you can imagine, the emotions were all over the map. But it was like kind of like an atomic bomb went off. It was rough. Is the hands down to this point. You always think you've been through the biggest storm of your life or ministry until you get to one that but to date, I mean, definitely the biggest battle, the biggest crisis that I've ever dealt with. Yeah, and I feel man, you never want to go through that again ever, and that's part of why, man, I love that you're bold enough to address this topic. Is if we could help any church prevent it, but if we could help any church like recover well and be strong again. Because I didn't know. I mean, you don't know. You have faith in the Lord, but you don't know how people are going to respond. And there was that. I mean, it felt like we had a really healthy, strong church, biblical church, outward focused church, but you just don't know how it's going to play out and how people are going to, the disillusionment, right? Like what we're talking about. I'm just so disillusioned. I'm done. I don't want to. So, yeah.
What's interesting is when scandal hits the church like this, everyone starts to think of the families. Everyone starts to think of the congregation. I don't know how many people actually think about how a scandal affects the lead pastor. And so when this scandal hit, like, how did you? There were so many people that needed care and tending to. How did you begin to prioritize the work that needed to be done to start initiating healing for everybody?
Yeah, man, it was exhausting. It was, I only the Lord, right? I mean, I love what Paul says about one season in his life. He said the Lord, like there wasn't really anybody around, and that's not true of me. I had a lot of support from leaders in our church. I'll explain that, but he said the Lord stood by me and gave me strength. That's the only explanation. I mean, because it's just physically, emotionally, mentally, just there's not enough strength in our human capacity to get through something like that. I mean, so yeah, it started with the news, just getting rocked by that wrecking ball, hearing the news yourself for the first time, and then having to go confront those individuals individually. Took a couple leaders along with me in those instances, but had to do that. Had to ask for credentials. Just that. Just so painful, just gut wrenching. And then obviously I started with our leadership team. I started with the elected leadership team. Hey, emergency meeting tonight. You got to be here, and then let that be processed and grieved and prayed over. And, man, they handled it so good, though. They were just so biblical and so focused. I mean, devastated because this wasn't just like a position. Like, oh, okay, a couple people that we hired. No, they were loved. They were they'd been here, had a long ministry here. And then, then we had to tell the entire church, right? So this happened on a Thursday. And then Friday, I was meeting with the leadership team. Saturday, we're still crafting our strategy here. And then Sunday, we're out with it. And we're just right to the whole church. And just immediately. So the timing was quick. And that's very vital, so vital. And then from there, then you're like, then it got intense, because then it's like you got every emotion under the sun, right? Like some people are mad, some people are questioning us, some people are blaming us. It's like what, but we didn't get defensive. By God's grace, we try not to get defensive, and we just try to listen to people. So we set up immediately we set up meetings with the youth group, with the children's, not children, but the parents of the children, caregivers of the children. We try to have those meetings immediately, trying to just instill hope, like, hey, this is nothing in our church. Our mission does not rise and fall on one person or a pastor. It's on the Lord Jesus Christ, and you got good leaders in place still. And then just individual meetings. I mean, we opened the door. I had so many, I can't even count how many one-on-one meetings I had. Other pastors were helping me with this too, but I had the bulk of them. Just, meeting with people, letting them cry, letting them weep, letting them ask 30 questions if they needed to, interrogate us. Because we vowed to be totally transparent, right? Totally. I say that. We said we're going to be truthful and transparent, but from this day on, this was on the Sunday we announced that we will not discuss individual actions or details. That's not going to be helpful to the healing of these families nor to our church. And so we made that absolutely clear. We had to stick the line. There was people, for whatever their motivation was, wanted to know the juicy details, and we just
let me stop you right there, because I think that's kind of going back to that phenomenon I was referring to. Like, there is an insatiable hunger for details of offense, it seems like right now. And it's kind of like that old adage about the news, like, fear sells. And, when it comes to scandal within the church, it seems like that there's this, I don't even know what you would want to call it. There's this desire to know all the gruesome details so that I can feel disgusted by it. And if I can feel disgusted, then I can be justified to be angry towards it, and so on and so forth. And it's it's an element of sickness, I think, that people experience in order to, I don't know, maybe it's just a gory pleasure, or maybe it is something that they feel like they need to be able to justify how they're feeling. I don't know. What's kind of your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's kind of, I was thinking, I had the image of a NASCAR. You're watching a NASCAR race, and you kind of secretly, you want to see that wreck, right? I mean, I want to see a white man. I want to see all these cars get tangled up, and I don't know why. I don't know why that is in our nature, but so we just had to really be firm at times and say, look, and then, under sometimes the accusation that you're withholding stuff from us, you're deceiving us. It's like, stop, we're not, but you have to trust your leadership team that we cannot say everything we know, right? And so we had to, and that didn't happen a lot, but there were some individuals that they really pressed us on that. And we just kept saying, look, we're not going to drag these pastors through the mud, and their families, their children. It's not going to be helpful. Why? What would that gain, right? That was kind of the question we posed to some. What would that possibly gain for us moving forward at Hope and with the mission of the church? And so,
and I feel that was really,
So
a very wise move that you guys had as well. I think that having the wisdom to let people feel their emotions, like, that was important. I'm sure, in the healing process, because people don't really understand the process of grieving, right? You got the 5 stages of grief, but people try to avoid those stages. They try to avoid anger. They try to avoid the what is it called, where you're pretending it's not real, right? Denial, And I think that in order for people to really heal, you have to give them an open space to be able to, like, no, you can come experience all these stages of grief with us, and we'll walk through it with you. And if you need to direct that anger towards us for a little bit, we'll let you do that. Did you find a lot of that stuff was helpful in helping people really kind of process through?
So the stages of grief was very real, very valid. And then we learned something, I guess you kind of knew this mentally, but we got to see it firsthand. It's not that's cycle of grief is not linear, right? It's not like, okay, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, we're done. No, it's like back and forth and all over, and this and then a lot of repeating of maybe the anger blows up at the oddest moments in your life. Something triggers that, and sorrow, and we experienced that a lot of our youth, especially a lot of that, and it just takes time, and you got to be patient. It's got to come alongside. I would say this: the wisdom God gives, like, because I mean, we've been through this, and we're almost a year past it now, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, but the church landscape is totally different now in a very good way. So God's done an amazing thing in just not even a year. I'm so grateful, and there was no script for this. We couldn't find another. Yes, there's scandals everywhere of different varieties, but this particular one, where half your staff gets wiped out by the enemy, like, and choices in when one, I mean, we couldn't find another script for that
Yeah.
anywhere. So the wisdom God gave us, and the wisdom he gave our leadership team to help navigate this through and think through it was so, it might have looked on the outside like we had it all polished up and ready, but man, we were just totally radically dependent on the Lord. Like, you
Yeah.
have to help us. I would say this, Jeremiah, too, in pastors, maybe, and maybe this question, I'm sorry, coming later, but for pastors dealing with this, it was important for me. I'll say, I had offers we had support from the district level, which I was grateful for our district, but even offers to come in and speak and make a statement. And I just, something inwardly, something from the Lord said, you got to handle this. You're their pastor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think I think that would be a mistake. In some settings, it might be good. I don't know. But for us, it was like, our church is, without going to all the details, our church is very different, I think, than a lot of churches. We're a military church. And so we got people from literally all over the country and all over the world here. And our church rotates very quickly. And so they don't even know who it. So what I'm saying is, they didn't have a relationship with our district superintendent, as wonderful and encouraging as he was to me. So his role for me was just prayer, how you doing, checking in, which he did that. Give us some practical guidance on next steps. But for me to handle that was so vital. To give that role to anybody else, I think would have eroded the trust, right? And like I'm kind of handing that off to somebody else. So just a side thought that came to my mind, but.
Well, and I think what's important too is as the leadership goes, so goes the church, right? And so if the leadership is forthright, honest, transparent, upfront, and saying, we're going to tackle this issue, we're coming from a place of victory, and we are not going to be overwhelmed and drowned out by this. And several churches have been. I've seen churches that have gone through similar scandals, and the pastors didn't know what to do, and the church just kind of sank like a sinking ship. But it was. I remember I kind of had gotten wind of everything, and about the day before. So I remember tuning into your guys' live stream. You said something really important, I think, as well, and maybe you can walk us through that. You made sure to reassure and reinforce the fact that just because this happened doesn't mean you were going anywhere. You were not jumping ship. You were not like, oh, this is too hard for me to handle, I'm out of here. Kind of walk us through that. What made you feel like that was something that needed to be said? And did you kind of struggle internally with that idea that, man, maybe I should just walk away from this fire and go somewhere else?
Yeah, I never had that thought initially, like, oh man, I'm done. I mean, I couldn't do that to our church. I mean, again, the calling of God is so vital. Like, God called us here, right? It wasn't just we think this will be a great opportunity or a better job than what we had. No, it was God's calling. And so, like, we knew God had called us here for a purpose. And I told our leadership team, we are not gonna duck our heads and be depressed and, oh, woe is us. No, God knew this was coming. God put us in this place of leadership and responsibility for a reason. He knew he trusted us for this season, right? And so that gives you some hope and confidence. But yeah, I just felt it was so vital to say, look, you just know we're gonna walk this through with you. We're not going anywhere. Terrible thing happened, right? But there's hope ahead, and we just kept focusing on the mission. We kept focusing on the hope. There's still a mission to accomplish. I had another thought that just escaped me, but I will say this again, being totally transparent. So back to 2020, we all went through COVID. That was exhausting. And then personally, at the local level, we had about a year of terrible, intense, brutal staff conflict. What we learned after the blow up, I'll call it, or the scandal, was that we believe a lot of that conflict, almost entirely, was kind of a smoke screen or a bubbling up from the sin, right? That was being hidden. We found out later. And so that was exhausting. I mean, like almost to the point that some of our staff were like, I can't do this anymore. I'm at. So that year of conflict, just like, and then the scandal coming out, and then leading through that for the next 6 months, at least 6 to 8 months. So there came a point in my time where I was like, Lord, I feel like I've got the church back on, not me, but I feel like I've helped lead and get us back on solid ground. We've got our team put back together. We've replaced those. God has provided leadership for those staff positions that were vacated. I feel like I've done this now. Maybe maybe I'm ready to hand this off to somebody else because
Mm.
I'm flat wiped out, and I don't know.
Yeah.
So I had that thought, and it persisted for a few months, to be honest. It's not hanging on now, so I'm thankful for that, guys. I didn't know where it would lead. I was ready just to say, okay, I think I'm ready to hand this off to somebody else. I've got it back to where I think someone else could take it and run with it into better days. But like
Hmm.
the Lord still has more for us to do, I guess. So we're
Yeah.
staying the course, yeah. So
That's good. You mentioned earlier that the landscape of your church has changed, and I know a lot of churches who experience some kind of scandal to this magnitude. They kind of have a mass exodus that
yeah.
takes place, and a lot of people end up leaving. Did you guys experience that, and how, kind of what you were talking about? How did your landscape change?
Well, and again, no lying, no pretending. Early on, dark days. I mean, felt like death. It really did.
Mm.
Just felt like death. There's joy was not. I mean, we were still worshiping and gathering, and I was still preaching my heart out. And but man, it was rough. Those first few Sundays afterwards, and then not knowing the uncertainty of like, okay, let's see if anybody comes back the next Sunday. But what we
Mm.
heard from that first Sunday gave us a lot of hope. I mean, so many people, either in person right after the announcement, texting later, messages later, just say, we're so thankful for our church. We're so thankful for the way you handled it. So much integrity. And so that, I think that was one of from a human element, that was the best thing we could have done. Just come out, right? Name it, just state it. Don't fluff it up with a bunch of words and theological language, and just say it, right. Here's what happened, and man, we're devastated and we're hurting and we need the Lord more than ever. So that was what I think won the day, so to speak. There was a lot more that had to be done, but man, that laid the groundwork for us to move forward. We did lose some families. I mean, there were some families that just there's a lot of other factors that I won't go into that led to their departure as well. Part of it was the
Hmm.
scandal itself, but a lot of it, there was other issues that were maybe very unhealthy. So anyway, but no, we really didn't. Everybody held firm. Giving stayed strong. Not that that's what it's all about, but
Right. Right.
that's an indicator people have confidence in the leadership and the mission of the church. And then also because
Yeah.
we are a military church, we in a strange way that helped us, because 6 months later there was people that are like, so they don't even know anything has changed. They don't know anything has gone. So that the turnover, the rapid turnover of our church, in an interesting way did help us.
Yeah.
Not that we were trying to hide anything from anybody that was new, but we did have new people there. They were just saying, man, we appreciate how healthy the church is. They've rallied together.
Mm.
Unity, I think, is so key too. That somehow, some way, we were able to communicate and model genuinely the unity of our leadership team, our staff, like the ones that were still remaining. And I think that
Yeah.
gave the church a lot of confidence and hope too. Like, there's nobody's breaking ranks here, right? Everybody's 100% united in purpose on this and strategy. So that was good. I was so thankful. I could not have done it. I don't think any pastor could do it by themselves. If you're a leadership team, the elected leadership team, and if a church pastor has staff, if they're not 100% united, I don't know if you'll weather it. So that's
Right.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. You had mentioned that the most affected people were probably the younger generation, the youth, and then younger families. What did you experience anybody that just became so disillusioned that they decided to walk away from the faith altogether? That they were just ready to just be done being Christians because of this. Anybody that had a crisis of faith, I suppose,
Yeah.
from this whole situation.
I cannot think of anybody that just said, I'm done with following, I'm done with God, I'm done with Christ, I'm done with God's word, is totally out. There were a few of our youth who, again, this is hard to discern, right? And I'm not blaming, I'm just saying there's so many factors involved. Like at that age, it's a tough age anyway. You're finding
Hmm.
your own faith, you're finding out what you really believe, and there's a lot of temptations and pressures and voices in working on you. So there were some teens that left. You have to wonder would they have left anyway. I don't know the answer to that. That definitely did not
Hmm.
help, and definitely there was pain. But the ones who I'm thinking of that experienced the most pain, like grieving, deep grieving, and to be honest, I had. So here's what was interesting. I'm not just the pastor of the church, man. I've got kids that are in these ministries that were affected. So I'm a dad. I mean, one of the most devastating things was having to tell my family, and that was a step I took. I told my family before I told the church. I wasn't going to let my
Hmm.
daughter hear it on Sunday morning, my daughters, and I told them in the living room, and that was harder than telling the church in many ways. It was just so much. It was devastation and the will, just everything, disillusionment, and that was tough, to work through that. So I'm as a dad, but I'm also trying to lead the church forward and that pain. But thank the Lord, I've seen healing in those instances, not just with
Yeah.
my daughter, but I've seen the Lord just do miracles of healing and restoration, and so it's been good to watch. We're so thankful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the toughest situations, I think, is when your kids are directly involved, right? Like the pain hits them as hard as anybody, and it's hard to switch that line, right, from pastor to dad, and then can you even be a pastor dad or
Yeah.
as a dad? Like there's elements of like I need to defend my kids, I need to, and to work through your own personal emotions when it comes to that. And so I guess that would be kind of my next question. How did you deal with your own emotions through all of this? Did you have mentors that were helping you? Did you reach out to anybody for support? Obviously your wife was there for you, but I'm sure she's struggling too.
Yeah, she was interested,
Anybody's more angry than a daddy's heart, it's a mama's heart.
yeah. Yeah, great question. So I'll back up just a little bit. I think it increased that, it strengthened the trust and our leadership. When I was able to say, look, to these parents, when we met with them as groups, when I met with them individually, look, I could look them in the eye and say, I know how you're feeling. I mean, I really do. I feel the full depth of this and what it's doing to your family, how your kids, because there was a lot of parents that didn't know, like, how do I help my kid through this, right? And so as I was on that journey too, I think God taught me a lot of lessons that I was able to pass on. They taught me some things too. They helped me with some things as well. I think this is important, Jeremiah. Sorry, I'm kind of skipping around, but one thing we did that really helped, because not everybody was like angry and like, oh, I can't believe they did that. Some of them were like, we had some people that said, they ought to come back almost immediately. And we had to work them through that. But the way we worked through that was to not invalidate all the good that these pastors had done. We made sure to say, look, there was a lot of, God did use them, and there was some good that was accomplished. And that is not a race. That doesn't, we had people asking like, do I need to get rebaptized because I was baptized? No, you don't. I mean, God still used them, and there was good seasons. And I don't know, again, when the slide started happening, if you could dissect that, do that autopsy again on the fall. But that was important for us to communicate. And now I'm sorry, I forgot your question. Oh, I have my own emotions. Yeah, again, being super transparent. I mean, just devastated, shocked. Like I like almost literally couldn't catch my breath when I heard it. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? I can't even process this right now. What? But at the same time, it did help us. There was some relief. It's in a strange way. I don't know how to communicate this. There was some relief. Like, oh, now I think I know why we had that year of conflict, right?
Yeah.
So that brought some answers, because it was a mystery. Like none of us knew. And we were getting ready to hire some outside mediation help. It got that bad. But now it's kind of like, oh, okay, I think we know why. But my emotions were all over the map. I mean, at first I'm just intensely focused on, okay, got to notify the board. We got to draft this response. We got to tell the church. After the adrenaline of the next few days wore off, then, and you're right. It's tough because you're helping everybody else process theirs, and you're not trying to be a pretender, but you are trying to stay composed and peaceful for them, because you want to project hope. And that was genuine, but in some ways it shields you from experiencing your own emotions. But yeah, I had the days of deep cry. I had that deep cry, that just sobbing before the Lord. I had that. That's vital, man. Don't resist that. Anger. I had to fight off unforgiveness and bitterness that came like waves over me, like just, in lots of ways, right? Like just anger, like how could you do this to your church family? That kind of feelings. But then I think the way I processed it is obviously through prayer and the word. I will say, man, God gave me a word. Can I share this word?
Yeah, please.
1 Peter 6. So this is what God gave me. I mean, in the moments of like just on my face before the Lord, like I can't do this. I don't even know how to lead through this. There's no script. There's no paradigm for us. The Lord we just had to follow him. And so it was 1 Peter 1:6, so out of the New Living Translation. So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. And man, I could preach a sermon on that, but It just gave me hope. Like, you're going to have to endure intense trials, but for a little while. There's a limit to this. It's not going to go on forever. It's not going to be the story of your church forever. It's going to be for a little while. And then that hope, there's wonderful joy ahead. And I did share that at a prayer gathering. And that was another strategy I might mention, Jeremiah, so vital. Immediately, prayer has always been very foundational to our church, and very much it's not just like something we do once in a while. It's foundational. It's ingrained in who prayer. Fan the flame is what we call it. Fan the flame prayer gathering. But that was definitely elevated during that season, right? But prayer and I'm sorry, I'm skipping around. If I could just back up, you say, how does a church weather this? Man, the foundation, just like it is in your individual life when you go through a storm or a trial or crisis, I think that foundation has to be laid, beforehand. You can't build that during the crisis. You're not gonna make it, right? So the foundation for us was like being mission focused, mission centered, outward focused, unity, foundation of prayer, right? Foundation on the word, those kinds of things, I think just held us up. But for me, when God gave me that word, that was like, oh man, I clung to that. I wrote it on my bathroom mirror. I wrote it in, not Sharpie, but what is it? The
dry erase marker.
Dry erase marker. Yeah, I wrote it on there. I could see it every single day, and I prayed that. I shared that with our staff, and that became a rallying point for us. Like, there's wonderful joy ahead. You have to endure. And then one prayer night, I'll share this. One prayer night, we were intentionally coming together for healing and restoration, healing in our own hearts and letting people grieve. And I'll never forget one of our lay leaders, she said, Mark, and this is not a person who's like given to, eccentric visions and all this stuff, and not real charismatic. She's very level, but she said, Mark, I saw something tonight. I saw, like, she described as like darkness being pushed back out of the sanctuary. She said, I saw that in my mind, and light coming in. And I'm not joking, Jeremiah. That was like, it didn't happen instantly, but that began the turning point. And I think God allowed her to see that. I didn't see it. But she shared that, and man, it was like the Holy Spirit was all over me, right? It was like, whoa.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you, Lord. And that happened in a night of prayer. And so, man, we hammered those nights of prayer. We just kept having them. And that was so vital. Anyway, I could share a lot more on that. But, just being anchored, for a pastor, being anchored, a leader, being anchored to that verse, that's what helped me. And then talking, I had some pastor friends that obviously call. Now, here's something that I think pastors have to be ready to navigate and experience. I didn't trust hardly anybody after that, right?
Yes.
I'm just being so honest. I had pastors from the community calling me, and I'm like, get back. I mean, I didn't say that to them, but in my spirit, I'm like, get back. I'm not saying nothing to you, because I don't know who I can trust at this point. And that took a while for the Lord to get me through that. Even on the district, even Nazarene pastor, I didn't know who I could trust. But there was one pastor I opened up to and confided in, and I remember saying, man, I feel so stupid. I feel like, why didn't I see this coming, right? There should have been warning signs. I should have caught this. I should have been better at giving accountability and asking hard questions even. And he just stopped me. He said, Mark, stop. He said, they deceived their own families for quite a while, right? They deceived a lot of people how could you have caught this? They were living in, like that. And so
right.
It kind of gave me like, whew, okay, don't live under that condemnation. So that helped in my own emotions. But then, after a while, there's been healing. There's been divine healing. And you say the landscape of our church. Yeah, now, I'm not saying people don't mention it. It still affects some of our staff. In fact, one of the things we have done even recently, we just realized maybe there's some more healing needs to be done. So our board is so amazing. They offered to pay for a month's worth of counseling for any one of our staff who was directly involved that wanted it. And I know a couple of our staff members are going to take up on that offer, because there's still some pain and some maybe root of bitterness there. They know they need to deal with. And I'm so proud of them for being honest. And we're very open about that. Like, we're not shaming them. We're like, hey, go get some help. Talk to somebody. So that just happened recently. So it's quite a process, isn't it? Yeah. It
is. Let me talk a little bit about the current state of the church. So there are people that have kind of a pessimistic attitude about situations like this, and they're like, this will be a dark stain on this church for the rest of its existence. Yeah. Is there a point wherever the work is done, and is that sentiment true, that a scandal like this has to be a dark cloud over the church forever?
Ah, boy. Again, if it's not handled right, it will be. It will be for sure if it's not handled right.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, no, and that's the hope. That's that, 1 Peter 1:6. There's wonderful joy ahead, and I just clung to that. Like, Lord, I believe you for that. I believe there's going to be true joy and true healing, and this is not going to be. It's not going to be the commentary, and it's not going to be part of the narrative of this church forever. And so I think just courageous leadership, again, not that comes from within, but just the Lord gives you that courage to lead and stay focused on. There's still lost people, right? There's still lost people that are going to spend eternity apart from God if we don't stay focused, we stay on the mission. So we can't wallow too long, right? We can't stay stuck in the past too long. There's a future. So that, and then just again, kind of where our unique environment, our church revolves so fast. That does help us. That did help us in this setting, because we got new guests coming all the time that, again, they don't even know. So we're not going back and talking about it every week, obviously. And then just focused on the new team members that came and joined our staff. They were called and brought on, pouring into them and helping them to. God helped us there. I'm telling you, we had a lady in our church that stepped up into one of those roles.
Mm-hmm.
That was a miraculous provision from the Lord, that she didn't even know she was called or could do that. She felt so inadequate, so unqualified, and that was awesome to see the transformation in her during the 21 days of prayer and fasting. God spoke to her and said, I'm calling you into this. You can do this. She came to that realization. Of course, I thought she was. I mean, she stepped up and helped us on that first Sunday, but then she said, "I'll help you until you find someone," kind of thing. And then that just the watching the process of revelation to her was awesome. And then God helped us find our other staff position we needed to fill, and miraculous provision. We had to wait a little longer for that, but and then having your team kind of unified, put back together again is a benefit in many ways. There's still grief, though. There's still grief because there were some long-term relationships that were had of our existing staff, the remaining staff, with those who had departed. And that again, that's part of the process of grieving and healing. But no, it didn't have to be. And I would say now, I mean, I don't know if I can say this like 100% certainty, like, oh, there's no residue of this. I don't think that would be accurate, but for sure, we're focused. I don't think anybody's looking back anymore. We're focused. There was a couple things we're in the middle of a big building project or getting ready to launch one, and that's kind of gave us a rallying point. That was in a place before this. We didn't generate it, but that gave everybody a focus and a cause and some hope. Like, hey, this is something to unite on. And then and then
so talking about the staff members that left or that were just what's the word I'm looking for? They were let go.
Yeah.
Talking about those staff members, what happened to them, and what's what's been the whole plan over the last year?
Well, again, so proud of our leadership team here, because there was no spirit of vengeance or like let's make them pay for this. There was deep grief and sorrow, but then that hope that they could be restored. If there was appropriate repentance, appropriate humility and response, and the passage of time is so vital. The time key in our tribe. If you got listeners who are not Nazarenes, there's kind of a prescribed, somewhat a prescribed approach to this. If there is sexual scandal, it's a minimum of 4 years before you could even begin to think about the restoration of your credentials. And I think that's healthy. I think it's probably good, provided there's good accountability and support along the way. But as far as, I think what I can say without going into too much detail is we're so thankful that it really does appear that the marriages are going to survive. The families are going to stay intact. God's done some healing there, some miraculous work. They've found church homes. And then in time. And so there's some keeping of some relationship. In our tradition as Church of the Nazarene, there's a district recovery board. That's formed in instances like this that lays out some goals and some requirements for accountability, mentoring. So this would be true of anybody. I think that'd be vital. someone who has fallen into this person, they have a mentor, they get some counseling, they get some marriage counseling. They do not jump back into service too soon. And that's why I appreciate our parameters there. It seems like a long time. It seems extreme to some, but I don't think it is. I think it's good that there's that hope that you can be used of God again, just like Peter was, right? Peter was restored, and but for certain actions, and then the details of certain actions do play into this too. Like how long did this go on? That would be a general question. How long did this go on? Was it a a momentary fling? That's still going to be disqualifying, but at the same time, it may alter the responsibility. But anyway, there is a process to work back. Initially, just want them to go and worship with their families, just heal and worship and unite and work on that marriage again. There's deep hurt there as well.
Yeah.
But then in time, obviously, more and more ministry responsibility will be given if they truly want to. Now, some pastors don't. They just say, no, I'm not interested in restoring my credentials after this. And they don't. But if they do, then there's a process. And we believe there's, again, that awesome grace, right, that can make that a reality. So cool. So we hope to see that in time with these. Yeah, absolutely.
That's good. That's really good. I want to give you an opportunity to give some words of hope and encouragement as well. And so if there has been anybody who is listening right now who has maybe lost their faith from being hurt by a church scandal, people that have maybe just walked away because they thought the church was one thing and they experienced another, and therefore they kind of like what you said, they lost that trust in even the institution or lost their trust in Christians altogether. What's something that you would say to them? What advice would you give to them to help them maybe have the courage to begin the process of rediscovering their faith?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I guess, again, like we kind of laid the foundation here, just validate their feelings. This is awful. This is horrible. This is not God's will. This is not the way this is not pleasing to the Lord. Just validate that. We don't try to cover it up or deny it or rationalize it in any way. I think that's important. And then just say, I guess maybe just encourage them to look at this circumstance, look at what happened through the lens of the cross, right? To see it instead of the other way around. Don't look at the scandal and then try to interpret God's presence, God's love, God's promises through that. So I think it helps me in any kind of crisis to look through I think about what the Lord Jesus Christ did for me. And I think about the sinless one who could have had the authority and the power to stop it all. And yet he hung there for us. He bled and died, suffered, was tortured, and he died. He gave his life for me, and take away all my sins. And when I think about that love and the greatest display of love ever, right, that we've ever known. And to think about that now, is there anything that he's not going to be faithful in? Is there any way he's not going to give me what I need? And so I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what helps me, right? And then I look at my circumstances through that. I'm like, okay, that's awful, but it doesn't change the Lord's love or his promises or his faithfulness to me. I think that's huge. And then I would encourage that person, and I think you got to be sensitive to this, and it takes time, right? There may be a valid reason to kind of lay out for a little while, man. You go heal, man. Maybe you need to watch online for a little while. Maybe you just need to do a personal Bible study for a while. I don't know. Maybe the corporate setting is, you're not ready for that right now, but you can't stay there forever because, again, this is Christ's body. This is his bride. I use this analogy a lot when we do new membership classes, like for people to say, hey, I love Jesus, but I hate his bride. And I'm not going to have anything to do with this. Can you imagine someone saying that about Rena? I like you, Jeremiah. Hey, let's be friends, but are you going to bring Rena along? She's awful. I can't stand her, man. I mean, she was so rude to me the last time. And to say that about Christ's bride, and I think to lead people to that realization, like, no, you can't make it as a solo Christian. I don't care what this world tells you. You've got to be connected to the body. There is still healthy, godly leaders of integrity. There are churches of integrity that are biblical and they're standing firm, and you can't quit, right? You may need to leave the church that it happened in if you can't handle being there every Sunday and you don't have confidence in your leaders there. You may need to be to another church, but you got to be a part of the church, right? There's no such thing as a church Christian. And so I guess sensitively, I'd want to confront them with that reality too. And just prayer and support and just love and just, I don't know, all that's so important, but yeah.
That's good. That's good. Maybe on a little bit more of a personal/professional note, what advice would you give to pastors who are currently trying to work through some sort of scandal that they're experiencing in their church?
Oh man, be courageous, be strong, be courageous. I mean, I just thinking again. What did Paul say? I mean, I can't quote the chapter and verse right now, but Paul said these things happened, right? All these trials, all these they taught us. They taught us not to rely on ourselves, right? But the God who the God of resurrection power, and that's paraphrasing loosely, I know, but these things taught us not to rely on our own strength, our own wisdom. I think that's a good thing. I think so. So maybe part of it is just saying, hey, Pastor, just realize that as awful as this feels, as hard as this is, there's a shaping power from God in these trials, right? They're shaping you and helping you become more dependent on God. Anything that increases our radical dependency on God and refines us and exposes things in us that are not like Christ, I think that's a good thing, no matter how painful it is. So that would be my first thought. Let's think about it in that term. You got to get your face in the Word, man. You got to. I mean, I know we read the Word. Everybody say, "Well, I read the Word," but I mean, I don't know. For me, it just took on a new intensity and a new depth, and like I said, I just needed I not just read the word, but I needed a word. I needed a word from God, and you have to wait on that. It didn't come instantly, and I didn't come just from flipping through my Bible and saying, "Oh, that's it." I had to wait on that word, and when God gave it to me, I was like, "That's from God," and that anchored me. So find a word. It maybe just be one verse. Elevate prayer. And I would pray they have united leaders around them. And if you got
Yeah.
people that are breaking rank and they don't see it. They're saying a different message. That was one thing that was so vital. We had to have the same message, right? All of us had to have it. And not that we memorized. It wasn't like that, but we just had to have the same convictions and same, like, this is where we're going. And so I pray that you got to have good leaders around you, and hopefully you got a few. And then find those. Don't be as guarded, as hard-hearted as I was. Find. I'm a My wife accuses me a lot of not having a heart, or having a very small heart. And I don't process my emotions really well. I don't, I guess. So
Yeah.
there's probably some fault there, and I'm still learning that. But let yourself grieve and be honest about it. Don't try to be strong. Don't try to be like, I was pretty devastated that Sunday, and I didn't try to hide it, and I didn't try to manufacture emotions, but I didn't try to be the rock either. I was wiped out, and I'd let the
Yeah.
Greeks know that. So I think they appreciate that authenticity.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, there'd be lots of other things I probably would say too, but those are some of the main things.
Well, and I think that's some of the main takeaways from today as well is, despite how it happens and if it happens or when it happens, any time that the church is going through a struggle and a trial and a period of make or breaking it, survive or die.
Yeah,
That there's got to be transparency involved. That's what I hear you say. Lots of honesty, lots of transparency. There has to be a lot of love and compassion and connecting and being unified with people. There has to be a ton of prayer. There has to be just constantly coming before the Lord, both corporately and individually.
right.
And I just hear you say that you got to remain hopeful that God will bring you through. Keeping your eyes, there's a scripture that says, fix your eyes on Jesus. He's the author and the finisher of your faith. And so if you're in this trial, your faith's not finished, right? And so God is still authoring. So let's keep our eyes on Jesus,
Yeah.
who is continuing to do the work and working all those things together for the good.
Yeah, I think too, helping people realize this. I mean, you don't downplay the personal choices that were made and the responsibility that is required there, but and the consequences. There are consequences
Yeah,
for this, but don't forget the spiritual battle. I mean, there's an enemy that wants to destroy the church. He wants to destroy people's faith. He wants to kill, steal, and destroy. That's his. He's not just wanting to slow the church down, right? He doesn't want to
right.
inconvenience the church. He wants to destroy Christ's church. And so remember that. I think that's what gave me a lot of resolve, was just realize, look, not that I'm any match for Satan on my own, but with Christ in me, I mean, Satan, you're not gonna have this church, and you're not gonna win this battle. You're not. And just to realize we're gonna with the weapons of our warfare, right? With the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual weapons and the spirit, we're gonna win this, and we've already won. I guess that's right too. To remember,
Right.
we serve a God of resurrection power. He's already defeated Satan, hell, sin, and death. We're fighting from that place of victory already. That helps too, right? And that's not just, right? You can say that, you can preach those messages, but when you go through these times, man, that's where it becomes super real to you, right? It's like, man, yeah. Stay anchored to that. Keep your focus on that too. And so, because it is easy for people to get angry at flesh and blood, and that's not who we're fighting against at
Right.
all. So, yeah.
Oh, that's so important. That is so important. Well, we've covered a lot today, Mark.
Man, you did well. Good job facilitating. Yeah.
Did you anticipate being on here for an hour and a half?
I enjoyed it. Hey, man, if God can use this to help give someone else hope, I mean, that would have been awesome if there had been a podcast like this I could listen to before we went through it. But man, if our experience can help anybody else either heal faster, heal more thoroughly, or God willing, prevent it, that would be and I didn't talk about that much. So there's still, I'll just be again honest, we're still very much in process of saying, not that we're under the illusion that we can prevent it forever, 100%. I mean, because there's still the human element, but hey, are there some things looking back that we probably should have done, not to condemn ourselves, but so putting that in place with the newly formed staff, right?
Yeah.
All of us, all of us saying, hey, let's guard. And so there's been I'll say this, there's been a recommitment to transparency and honesty and confession and those things among our staff, which has been so refreshing, right? Because just like all the veneers got stripped off, and it's like, okay, let's be really honest. Are we struggling in some areas, and where do we need to help each other? And that's the thing too. I had talked to I talked to the former staff members, but I would say this to anybody, man, you got to find somebody to talk to when it's in temptation stage, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's that fear like, oh, I can't. So senior pastors, I'd say this to you, lead pastors, create the culture where there's not this fear, either subtly or you're creating it, either don't create it subtly, don't create it overtly, that your staff can come and tell you that there's this fear, right? That I can't confess this to my senior leader or else I'm going to be, but man, when it's at temptation stage, we can deal with it, right? We can put boundaries in place. After that, after the line's crossed, and then there's really no recourse for me to help. But I kind of, so that's helped us as this remaining staff to say, look, let's be honest and let's not fear, right? If you're tempted by something, whatever level, let's get that out in the open. Let's rally with each other. That's so crucial. So.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Well, Mark, where can our listeners find you? Are you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? Do you have email?
I'm not.
Website?
I'm not too deep into social media. I mean, I have Facebook. I get full transparency here. About 6 months ago, I got rid of Instagram. My wife and I have a very, very close relationship and very transparent and a very great marriage. And she just started saying, I don't like some of the things that are coming up on Instagram. And I have all kinds of accountability. I mean, there's nothing in my phone or tablets or computers that, I mean, she sees everything. She gets weekly reports from my internet activity and screenshots. So that's intentional. I want that. But she said, I don't like some of the things I'm seeing. And I'd committed to her. I know we're out of time probably, but
no, we got all the time in the world.
After this happened, Amy and I had a true heart to heart. It was like, okay, we don't think we're elevated. We don't think like, oh, we're immune or we're unsusceptible to anything, the attacks of the enemy. So what do we need to do? Is there anything we need to do better? Anything we need to change? I feel like we got a great marriage, but anything we need to do differently? And one of the things I committed to her, recommitted, I should say, was, honey, if you say it needs to go, if there's something that you need to change, you say the word and it's done. No question asked, right? I mean, if there was a relationship that she was uneasy about, there's not. But if there was, I'm just telling you, that's the level of commitment that I think you got to have. So, that relationship would end. I mean, in a minute, it wouldn't be it just wouldn't be any question in my mind. So one of those things was Instagram. And anyway, so I got long answer to your question, but I got rid of Instagram because I felt like a new resolve to guard my heart and my eyes and make a covenant with my eyes, Job says, right?
Right.
So I'm on Facebook. I probably, if it wasn't for ministry, I don't even know if I'd be on that, to be honest, but
right.
We're trying to bolster our social media ministry a little better here in the church. But that's building. But Facebook, text me, call me. I'm kind of still old fashioned. I like to just talk on the phone and Zoom, email me,
They can email you at markhatcher@jcnaz.org, or they can just visit the website, www.jcnaz.org. That'll work.
Yeah. So.
Very good. Very good. Well, Mark, I appreciate your time with us today. I appreciate you taking the time to be vulnerable and to share and walk through the story. I know that there are people who have walked away from the faith that by hearing this, they will feel the draw to start to come back home because there's hope obviously there's hope in Jesus and there's hope in life with Him. But I think this podcast will also help people realize there's hope for good churches. There's hope for healthy churches. And there's hope to be able to overcome the things that they are so just burdened by. And I think there's also for pastors who are currently in the thick of it, I think that this podcast is going to give them hope as well. This episode on how to overcome scandal. And man, I just appreciate your time and your honesty to be able to walk through that with us. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, appreciate you, Jeremiah. Doing awesome. So.
Hey, thank you. And hopefully we will do something again real soon. How about that?
Sounds great.